Attention viewers. A playback speed of at least 1.25 is recommended on this video because I talk slow. Laughing with tears coming out of my eyes emoji. But you don't have to, like if you've got a lot of extra time. Your personality type very well might be messing up your communication with others. N or S, of course, that stands for intuition versus sensing. Intuition has to be an N because introvert already took the I. Now, what intuition and sensing are talking about is really abstract versus concrete information. And Myers-Briggs didn't make this up. This is something that exists and has existed in psychology and philosophy for a long time. Reality is both abstract and concrete. Both of these types are dealing with reality in one way or another. But what do we actually mean by abstract or concrete? Here we go. I wrote it in some colors so we keep you all engaged. When we're talking about the concrete, we're talking about a real world object. And when we're talking about abstract, we're talking about an object of the mind. We're talking about observable versus not observable. Quantifiable versus not quantifiable. And a lot of times we're talking about a thing versus the category that the thing is in. A lot of people still debate over where the dividing line really is. And that's not just me talking about like, oh, well, we really can't say. No, that's like, you know, the philosophers and stuff are like, well, you can't always say exactly what is concrete and what isn't. Some examples of abstract versus concrete are goodness, which is abstract, and a good book, which is concrete. Although the wrinkle is, if I said good books in general, that would be abstract. But if I say that book is a good book and I'm pointing towards, you know, Harry Potter or whatever, that's concrete. I can pick it up and read it. Now, back in the day when I was, I believe that my class in high school was the last one to have analogies on the SAT exam, which is a very good demonstration of taking the concrete and putting it into the abstract in terms of the connection between the concrete things. So this is what a question would look like in the analogy section. A boat is to water as, and then you get, you know, a few options here. The intuitive connection between these two concrete things is that a boat is a vehicle that goes on the water. So the answer would be plane to air. Another example that's a bit more surprising is if I was just talking about comedy movies with you and I'm like, hey man, I love comedy movies. You might think that that is concrete, but that too is abstract because you can't watch comedy movies as a concept. That's just like the abstraction, the categorization of a bunch of specific movies. If I said Napoleon Dynamite, then yeah, that is concrete. I can watch Napoleon Dynamite. If I said movies like Napoleon Dynamite, now we're back into the abstract because that's a category or that's an analogy. I think a lot of times when we talk about personality types, we think that intuition is a lot more complex than it really is and a lot more disconnected from the concrete world than it really is. But as those examples should have shown you, intuition, aka abstract thought, is really only a couple small steps away from concrete thought. So now that I have belabored the point of abstract versus concrete thought, it should be fairly apparent to you that everyone does both of those things, thinks both of those ways, processes that information on both sides of it all the time. It's all about preference, baby. So intuitive types might know all the facts, might know all the concrete details, and in fact, they know a lot of them. But then the question is, what are they going to rely on when they are trusting? How do I know what is real? I'm going to trust the pattern that I see amongst the concrete facts rather than the facts themselves. And that's also what I'm going to communicate to other people because that's the important info that they should get. Likewise, sensing types very well are doing a lot of abstract thinking, but at the end of the day, they're like, okay, yeah, I see the pattern there, but I don't really want to say that that's the important thing. I don't want to say that I'm going to put my bet on that. If I have to say what is real, what is not real, I'd rather stick with what is provable and observable and the concrete facts right here. Do you understand what I'm talking about? You don't? Okay. Between the two types, I think that sensing types are going to be overall easier to understand than intuitive types, but you guys are still messing up communication in several important ways. Despite the clarity that you might bring to your communication in terms of the facts, in terms of what, it can leave people wondering, what is the context of this? You don't understand the why behind it. How does it all fit together? And then they might not be using analogies to help you understand how these facts fit together as they relate to something else. Let me give you some examples, player. Back when I was in school, my job after classes was to go to the scene shop at the theater and help build the sets for upcoming productions. So, you're building platforms, you're building walls for like a fake house, for whatever play is going to go on. And I had this professor who was oftentimes designing these sets. And so he would have the plans there and he would tell me what to build. A lot of times what he would do is he would say, I need you to cut 3 pieces of 2x4 at this length and go. And while that was clear in the sensory, the problem was he would never tell me like how it all fit together. He never stopped to say like, here's the overview of what we're doing. So a lot of times I would mess up the scenery. Even though he gave me very exact details, I wouldn't always know what I was doing overall. And so I would put things together technically in the way he told me to do it, but it was wrong because it wasn't taking into context everything else. Well, I had another professor in college. He was teaching about the fall of the Roman Empire, and every day he would give like a long, fascinating story of all the events that happened and the emperors and what they did and the generals and blah, blah, blah. Event. So at the end of each class, I kind of knew a lot of things that happened, but I was like, what? Can you zoom out and maybe show me the pattern generally of what was going on? A good analogy, a good zooming out and kind of blurring things a bit to get that top-down view can help you understand what all those details actually mean. And sensing types fail to do that a lot of times. Sensing types it seems ironic, but try to clarify what you mean with those details by giving some analogies, by giving a bit of an overview before or after you give all these facts. It helps contextualize what you're saying. Intuiting types. These types have much more vague communication that is typically a lot less clear than the sensing types. As we've discussed, there are some advantages to communicating in the abstract, but here's how the intuitive types, how you guys mess up your communication. Now, the probalo with a lot of intuitive types is that they give a lot of generalities, they give a lot of overviews, but it's so abstract that you don't really know what they were talking about. Like, it can leave you with a general understanding of the principles of what they were talking about, but if you were to then try to say what the practical application of it was, or a practical like real world example, you'd be a little bit hard pressed to say what they actually meant. Here's an example to clear things up. So let's say a friend is getting married and she's telling you about what she wants her wedding to be like. And she's like, oh, I want an eclectic mix of different aesthetics, and I want bold colors, and I want food that people are going to remember and it's unique. You might have like generally understood what she meant. But then if you're like, well, what does she actually want at her wedding? No clue. Like, she said bold colors. What colors? What are the colors even on? Is she talking about flowers? Is she talking about the groom's tie? Are we talking about a yellow submarine themed wedding where it's like we're in a... I don't even know where I'm going with that. Same with physics. It's like you can learn all these principles of physics, but if the teacher never tells you like, oh, you need to know this like because of this real world application, it's going to be difficult to really understand what they're talking about. Intuitive types try to clarify what you mean by bringing in the practical application of what you're talking about, or giving examples or illustrations of specifically what you mean. There's you in the monitor. Whoa. That's cool. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get even more specific. So you can really know like kind of the different struggles that each type has in communication. First up, we're going to talk about the SJ types. These types generally prefer introverted sensing. When SJ types give details, they're often very specific because those SJ types are kind of whittling down reality and the concrete observations they make to what they think are the most essential concrete facts. So that's what they're communicating. The problem is that can be confusing because other people might not understand why those details are significant. It's like, okay, I get what you're saying, but like, why these details? And so when other people are listening to you, if you're an SJ type, a lot of times they're just wondering, what should I be paying attention to? Like, they're giving me all these details and some of them don't really seem to be important. Like, they don't seem to fit together. What should I pay attention to? What's going to be relevant ultimately? What's going to fit into that abstract overview? When SJ types communicate, I think one of the interesting things they do is they tend to communicate in stories, and those stories tend to progress in a very structured, linear way. Although a lot of times it comes with a lot of details that don't matter. It matters to them. They struggle a bit to understand what details are going to matter to other people. Now, when SJ types use analogies, and they do use analogies fairly often, like that, and that can trip people up. They think, oh, I hear someone using analogies, they must be intuitive. No, everyone uses analogies, and everyone uses analogies to clarify things, but they use them a little more clunkily when you don't prefer intuition. When you use that intuition, it's really just like a splash of flavor in there, and you're kind of just like, okay, here's a quick thing. The SJ types, their abstract analogies tend to be stories that are a lot of times true stories, and it's like extremely clear what we're talking about concretely and extremely clear what the connection is abstractly in that analogy. The SP types, generally, they prefer extroverted sensing. It's a little different flavor of sensing than the SJ types. So these types will give concrete details that they deem to be objectively relevant. So as the SJ types are like, what are the few details that are relevant to me that help me make sense of reality? The SP types, it's the opposite. It's like, okay, let's just see what facts do other people need to know. The problem is that a lot of times these big relevant facts that the SP types have and communicate to other people are missing like little details in between, so that people get like sort of the big events that happen, but are like, well, okay, what happened in between? How did we get from point A to point C? These types also tend to communicate in information dumps. So they will just give you a bunch of info, and a lot of times it'll be those big details, and then they're just kind of like followed by the smaller details or whatever. It's kind of like, hey, let's sort out reality, like concrete reality, and figure out what it is. And you're like, dude, this is like so much information. So it's interesting. The SJ types and the SP types both of them can confuse other people with the details they are giving out. I think with SJ types, though, it seems like very particular. Here's detail A, here's detail B, here's detail pi. And everyone's like, why did you throw pi in there? Whereas the SP types are like, here's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. And everyone's like, whoa, dude. When the SP types use analogies, what I've seen a lot of times is that they're in relation to concrete things, less so like a whole drawn out story. And I find that they also will use relatively brief analogies as well. They might use a lot of them, but they'll just be like very quick, like, oh yeah, it's like this. Now let's talk about the intuiting types. First of all, we'll talk about the NP types. They have extroverted intuition. NP types make a lot of abstract connections and a lot of analogies and a lot of categorizations, because as we talked about, categories of things is abstract and intuitive. So the NP types are like, here's an analogy, here's a connection, here's all these things. It's like we're just talking about this one concrete thing, and they're able to throw up all these abstract connections to it, which can provide clarity, but it can also leave you a little bit confused because you're like, wait, you might forget, like, what were we talking about to begin with? And a lot of times, because these types throw out so many abstract things, when you look at them side by side, they can feel like inexact or contradictory or confusing because they make so many, and they're kind of like just those basic connections really quick. And when these types give concrete examples, when they go into their sensing side, it tends to be very specific and detailed. Now we go to the NJ types. They prefer introverted intuition. Now these types, they are using their abstract thinking to categorize and to make connections and see patterns in concrete reality and make them as simple as possible, to like boil down and condense everything into as few categories as possible. All right, so here's an example that might help clarify the NP versus NJ when I'm talking about the NP making all these things and the NJ trying to reduce it. This is theoretical, but an illustration. If you ask an NP type, like how many music genres there are, they're gonna like list 1,000 different music genres. They're going to take pleasure in seeing, oh, what are all the connections between these songs that make them this, that are slightly different than this, and how do they overlap? And like, oh man, there's all these different things. This particular song could be in 5 different genres, and like, oh, there's like 20 different subgenres within this subgenre. They'll find those abstract connections between the music and try to make as many as possible. Whereas if you ask an NJ type, how many music genres are there? On the extreme end, they might say, there are only 3 basic genres. You can boil everything down into 3 genres. Now, I know that's kind of ridiculous, but I'm just trying to exaggerate in order to demonstrate this level of categorization. NP, let's categorize as much as possible and as much detail as possible. NJ is like, no, let's reduce it. Let's get rid of as many categories as possible and combine them. And so for the NJ types, their communication can be unclear to others because the way they categorize the world, the way they look at it abstractly, can seem overly simplistic in the way that they say that things are like each other. And it can seem kind of dense and obscure to people. And I mean dense just like in like, how do I understand your connections here? Not dense like stupid. These types tend to communicate in analogies that are like singular and detailed rather than going off and doing a bunch of, related abstract analogies. They're just like, okay, no, I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to find the single perfect analogy for you, and that's it. And when they give examples, it tends to be pretty basic and bare bones. It will be concrete, but it's going to be like the easiest, like most obvious concrete example that you could come up with. Leave me a comment. Let me know what else you would like me to cover. Until next time, stay cool and attractive.
They say a strange